Hello, everyone. I'm Mackenzie Jacob, your host, and welcome back to Dressed Rehearsal, the podcast where Broadway meets fashion and we discuss personal style and the roles that shape us on stage and off. Today's guest is a woman whose work is bursting with truth, joy, and humanity. Josefina López. Josefina wrote Real Women Have Curves when she was just 18 years old, drawing from her own experience growing up undocumented in Los Angeles. That play became a cultural touchstone, eventually adapted into the beloved HBO film featuring America Ferrera. And now, over 30 years later, it's made its Broadway debut as a musical. If you haven't seen the show yet, picture a cross between In the Heights and Kinky Boots, a vibrant, moving celebration of Latina womanhood, generational strength, and self-acceptance. Set in a small dress factory in East LA, it follows Anna, a young woman torn between honoring her immigrant family's sacrifices and pursuing her own dreams far away in college. The American dream is found in this dress factory, as the fashion industry is the key to freedom for so many immigrant women. The show is full of heart and joy, and it also feels more relevant than ever, depicting the hardship endured by brave immigrants that come to the US chasing the American dream. The musical earned two Tony nominations, Best Original Score and Best Featured Actress in a Musical for the incredible Justina Machado, who full circle played Anna, the daughter, in the original play 3 decades ago and now portrays her mother on Broadway. I first met Josefina at a talkback in my office, and I genuinely was moved to tears. Her honesty, her strength, and her belief in the power of storytelling stayed with me, and I just knew that her voice would really resonate with all of you. She continues to make an impact through her community work at CASA 0101 Theater in Boyle Heights, which just marked its 25th anniversary. So keep an eye out for the upcoming documentary, CASA 0101 Theater 25 Years of Theater, Transformation, and Community, chronicling the bold barrier breaking work being done there every year. Josefina's signature style is joy in the face of adversity, and this conversation is no exception. So let's get into it. Welcome, Josefina Lopez, to Dress Rehearsal. How are you?
I'm terrific. I'm so excited to talk about my style and, real women have curves. And
I mean, Real Women Have Curves is just like the perfect blend of the two. It brings in the dress factory, the style, and then also just like your personal experience. And so I'm curious, starting at the beginning, I've heard you say that you believe artists are the children who survived. So I would love for you to talk about like when you got bit by the artistic bug and kind of when it became your creative outlet.
I really was born an artist. I'm very lucky that since I was 5 years old, I knew I was going to be a writer and a performer and an artist, which I am all three. And so I feel absolutely blessed that when people say, when did you know? I said, I just was born knowing I could write. And, since I was 5 years old, I was telling stories. I have a really good memory and I tend to repeat jokes and stories. And so my mother would say, oh, tell everybody the story about the little feminist aunt who built her own house. And then I would be like, oh, and so I was lucky since the very beginning. So, I was already writing plays when I was in fifth grade. And I was
Wild.
producing in my backyard. And then when I was 17, I wrote my very, very first play, like a one-act play that got produced for a PBS special. And it won an Emmy. And, and
Very
so when I,
casual.
yeah, no, and then at 18, 19, I started writing Real Women Have Curves. And at 21, I got produced. And then there was already interest in making it into a movie. So I really I have to tell you that I knew I was a writer like from the very beginning, so I'm blessed.
And isn't it wild? You look at like curves that you wrote when you were so young, you look at The Outsiders that they wrote at like 16 years old, and it's like when you have a story to tell and it's your world, it flows so authentically. And so I know the curves is based on your life experience, and if you could kind of
Mhm.
talk about what that dress factory meant to you, kind of when you realized there was like a rhythm in the dress factory and how that translated to your first stab at the script.
Yeah, so I was undocumented for 13 years. So after I graduated from high school even though I went to the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts and I had a very promising career as an actress, I knew that I couldn't go to college and and so I had to work in a, so I had to basically take whatever job I could get until I became a legal resident. And so then I decided to work at my sister's sewing factory. And luckily, I didn't have the dire circumstances that Ana Garcia did in the play, the movie, and the musical. I actually chose to work there because I wanted to continue with my education at the community college. So I basically worked with her and then I would take night classes. And so when I was in that factory, I learned a lot about what it meant to be a woman, and I also learned about the everyday, day to day. And one of the things that I thought was the most tragic was that, well, it was the first time I had seen a size 00. I had
Mm,
never heard that there was such a size, And why would you put a zero? Like women should take up space and women have the right to take up space. So why would you ever create a size 0? And so for me, I just thought that was so moronic. But I wasn't, I put labels on things. So I had to deal with a size 0. And I'm like, no, like, women exist, and so we would make these beautiful dresses, but we could never wear these dresses, or we wouldn't have places to go with these dresses because we were working class women. And so for me, I just thought that was such a tragic thing. But then I loved going to the sewing factory because of the juicy gossip.
who
And
doesn't?
yeah, no, it was like it's such hard work. And I wasn't a great seamstress because, so I could sew barely. And so my sister said, why don't you just iron?
Mm,
And then I would use the steam iron. And then one day it was so hot because in LA it gets like 90s, 100 degrees. And we couldn't have a fan because the fan would blow dust. And so it was like 100 degrees and I'm steaming like for hours. And I'm just like, I don't care. I took off my clothes. And the women, started, playfully criticizing me. And my mother would say, oh my God, put your clothes back out. Put your clothes back on. What are you doing?
mm,
And I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, I can't continue working. And, and it was so liberating to be able to do that and not care. And then and I told the other women, why don't you take off your clothes too? And they were like, they were too scared and too shy and too like, oh no. But in my mind, I imagined what would happen if these women said, enough, we've had enough. And and so for me, I just this world of this factory was so fascinating because I there were so many details and it was so messy, like in the show version, it's too clean. I always tell people, no, no, it's messy. I know it's hard to make transitions when you have that much of a mess, but I said, no, it's like you had to like move stuff around. I
mm,
mean, it was such a tiny space. There's garbage everywhere because of all the papers that come with all the roll-up
right.
fabric. And so I just the 1001 details were so fascinating to me that I would write them down. And so every time I go to the bathroom, I would pull up my journal and keep notes. And then every joke that the women would tell, the stories. But it really made me appreciate being a woman. And it was the first time that I saw that women, Latino women, were not helpless
Mm,
victims, that we actually had something beautiful. And then my sister had a crush on the guy next door who we all thought he was a loser and we would call him El Tormento, the tormentor.
right.
And but she was like, oh, my sister was such a romantic. So she wrote a poem and she got on top of a bucket and she started reading the poem to us in the factory. And we all applauded. And in that moment, I said, oh my God, this isn't just a sewing factory. This is a sacred space for women. It was theatrical, it was a sanctuary, it was a retreat from men.
Mm,
And we shared stories. And then the radio would play, and then but the sound of the machines, each machine had a different sound.
mm.
And when they go, it was like they like you could hear
Like
like, oh
beatboxing.
yeah, it was like that. And then the radio would play, the horns outside because there was always traffic outside, and every time the lunch mobile would come, they would play da 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 da, So I was like, oh my God, there's all this sound, and then I'd work with the mannequins, or I'd have to, do certain motions. Every day we'd all be doing certain motions, and I go, oh, there's a choreography to
Mm,
this factory and a rhythm. And so in my mind, I said, oh my God, this could be a musical. And I don't know how to write music. It's one of my aspirations one day. But I just thought, okay, I'll write it as a play. I'll write what I do, what happened. And then I wrote the play. I went off to college. I got my green card, and then the play got produced in San Francisco. And even before it opened, I already had like a Warner Brothers interested in making it into a movie. So yeah, I was so surprised. And you know, I really admire the 18-year-old who had the foresight and audacity to believe that her story mattered, and that the story about these women, and part of it was because, you know, people may feel sorry for Latinos, well, especially right now,
Mm.
but people may feel sad for and sorry for our community, but we are not victims. And the other thing is we're having so much fun, and there is so much joy in being present and being with women, that I said, I want to capture this reality because no one would believe me that even though you may be oppressed,
Mm.
can still choose your experience. And dignity is about understanding that you have a choice when you could be miserable, or you can say, no, I am grateful for this experience. And these women were grateful because they had work and they were able to, you know, feed their families. And the other thing was that I was reading Gloria Steinem and reading every white feminist, you know, book
Sure.
at 12 years old. I was already like, you know, militant, like, but it was the first time where I was in a sewing factory with women of color, with Latina women, where I realized, oh, you know, for some women, having children and having family isn't oppressive. It's a choice. It's something that women really love and enjoy. And I think the third world feminism perspective is something that's missing in a lot of this feminist theory. So it really opened my eyes, and I said, oh, I have something to say about that.
And I
So
think that's something so powerful about the fact that the dress factory provided economic mobility for these women. Like, if you don't speak the language too well, like, it is difficult to find roles that you can access. And the fact that they had power and autonomy from working in this factory is
that's
so
exactly what happened. Is my mother, you know, my father was a good provider, but a big cheater.
short.
And I'm not embarrassed to say that. And then again, not to justify his actions, but my mother got fed up with my dad
Mhm.
and basically said, no, that's it. You know, you give me the paycheck and I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go be, and so for her, sewing was gave her some autonomy and freedom and ability to speak up in her marriage. And what's so amazing is that, you know, I wrote the story thinking it's just a Mexican American story. And what you realize is that women all over the world were able to get economic autonomy through the sewing machine, through sewing, and that's all across the board, every immigrant group and all around the world, sewing is the one thing. And so I'm grateful for that. And I thought, oh my God, you know, like when you're going through something that's painful or hard or whatever, you really think you're alone. And then when you share your story, you realize, no, 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 this is a story of thousands of people and women and immigrants. And that's when you go, oh, wow, we're all going through the same experience, thinking we don't matter, we're alone. And we realize, oh, we're part of a big community.
And I think the more specific storytelling is, the more universal. You identify the fact that this is your story so specifically, but everyone has a different window in. I know you've talked about why you named the main character Anna and kind of what the inspiration there was, what that meant for you, that this is applicable to more than just your own community too.
So I went to the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts, and we were, you know, reading many plays, and one of them was The Diary of Anne Frank. And when I read that, I was so inspired because I felt like Anne Frank. I felt like, oh wow, we're hiding from the media because being undocumented, I was always afraid of being separated from my family, and I always grew up with that shadow of like, oh my God, what if I'm taken? What
Mm.
if we're separated?
The fight or flight.
Yeah, it was always there. And even, you know, now that I have a green card, I'm a US citizen, I see a ICE or whatever, my heart still goes like that,
Mm.
you know? So there is a little bit of PTSD there that you don't get over.
I mean,
And
how could you
so
not?
for me, I felt like I had to tell my story. And I always kept a journal. I've kept a journal since I was like 11. So like seeing Anne Frank keeping a journal and how important her words are to this day. And I thought, I'm going to tell our story. And so you know, I called my character Maria. And then when we did a reading of my play, someone said, oh, she's just like Anne Frank. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to call her Anna because there's so many characters named Maria, and Maria is my first name, but there's just too many Marias. So I said, I'm going to call her Anna Garcia. You know, she's our Anne Frank.
And
And yeah, it's so relevant today. I didn't think it was going to become this relevant, you know, but
right. Like, you can't control these things, but I think another really cool part of having the show on Broadway this year, not only in the context of kind of the world and all of the craziness, but was the fact that you were able to give the majority of the cast their Broadway debuts. And I think you being able to tell your story of the American dream while also giving light to so many Latin performers getting their own
a
American
lot of American dreams come true, especially for the actors that were immigrants,
dream.
like Teresa Cuenca and Sus Mendoza and esta Claudia Mulet, like they're immigrants, and they're like, oh my God, this is our American dream come true.
And I think highlighting them, and then also I'm curious for you to talk about like putting together the creative team beyond yourself and what it meant to you to have other people with similar backgrounds as you to understand that story.
Yeah, so this is the fourth attempt at a musical. And I tell people, if you haven't tried at least three times, you're not trying hard enough. Because I found out with Real Women Have Curves, the movie, that it took at least three attempts.
Mm-hmm.
So after the movie came out, my manager and I actively sought out producers, and we worked with different people, and it didn't work out for many reasons. And so when Sergio Trujillo won the Tony for choreography, best choreography in Ain't Too Proud, and he talked about being an immigrant, and he talked that he dedicated to the immigrants. I was so proud of him. And I told my manager, Sergio is going to direct it. I guess it didn't happen until Sergio won a Tony, because I said, he gets it. He knows what it is to be an immigrant, and he's proud of it. And let's approach him. And sure enough, they were thinking the same thing. And then we met in the middle, and we're like, yes, there. And I knew, and when he and I met, and here he came to Los Angeles, and we met, and we both started crying, because we both know how painful it was to be undocumented. And also, we both wrote the story to celebrate our mothers,
Mm.
because in the end, our mothers are really the hero of our story, because they sacrificed so much and gave us these dreams, and they allowed us to have this dream come true. And yeah, Sergio said, yeah, my mother is a seamstress, and she was a seamstress, and I owe so much to her. And I said, yeah, my mother too. Like, I can finally say that. Uh, yeah, I get really emotional because my mother passed. And so for me, like, seeing the musical on Broadway and knowing that it's going to have a life is the way I keep my mother alive, is the way I keep her story alive. Because my mother would come to life through Justina every night when she gives her daughter her blessing. I just would cry, because I'd be like, oh my God, for that moment, my mother is alive.
Mm.
I'm reminded why this story is so important, that my mother will live on.
And I think something so special about it too is you realize your parents are going through life for the first time also. And I
Mhm.
think growing up, you assume that they know everything and that they know the world. And it's really special, especially to see Justina Machado go from playing Anna in the original play to now playing the mother in the Broadway show.
I love that. I love that, right?
Right, and it mirrors the fact that we do become our mothers, whether we like it or not. We absorb so much of what they learn, and I'm sure you're feeling it now more than ever too, of like so much of her strength is now in you, and
Mm.
that story is so wild to see Justina like go from a million years ago working on this play with you to now like being Tony nominated for the role. Like, what does that mean to you?
So, one of the things that I've learned about the story and why it's been so successful is because it's showing women that there are four stages of womanhood. There's the
Mm.
virgin, maiden, the mother, and the crone, the wise woman, the wise Latina. So for me, having Justina be able to play, Anna, to now being the mother, shows you the stages she's gone through her life. Justina may not have become a mother, but that is a stage that she went through, as far as, nurturing other people, nurturing relationships, right? But that we have to honor these four stages of womanhood, because unfortunately we live in a society that only wants women to stay in the spring of in their youth, and basically tells us we only matter to us when you're fertile and you're young and you're pretty. And
Mm.
in reality, humanity has survived as a result of the wisdom of women. We're supposed to then accumulate all this wisdom and pass it on. And that's how humanity has survived, as
Wow.
a result of women, reflecting and then sharing this wisdom. And we don't value this wise woman stage that we need to. And so the story is about these women transitioning from the four stages, and they're kind of stuck, and eventually they move on. In the play, especially, you see how Anna can't quite move on. Rosalie, is kind of the virgin. This lady can't have children. She's kind of like the mother. She's trying to transition to motherhood. And then the mother's going through menopause, but she doesn't quite want to. And then she eventually accepts that role.
Mm.
So it's celebrating women at the different stages of their life. And that's something that we rarely get to see, because when you see movies, they're always about a guy winning the woman or winning her heart, but she's always this beautiful thin thing that he can rescue.
Mm.
And I think stories about women are about us having to understand that we are the greatest love story of our life, that we are here to give, to nurture, to create community, to create culture, and to honor our intuition. And that's really how everyone benefits. But that's our value is inherent. It's not something that we gain by being married. It's not something a man can give us. It's something that we have inherently. And so it's taught me a lot about my power as a woman and my power as a spiritual being and as a human being.
And I think something that was really beautiful to see too is that so many strong women came to support the show, from Eva Longoria to Sarah Bareilles, Sofia Vergara, like seeing all these really powerful female voices embrace the show. Like, what did that mean to you? And did it feel like it was reaching the right ears?
Well, I was just so happy that we had their support because ultimately I'm celebrating all women.
Mhm.
I'm celebrating a Latino story, but I want this to be successful so that there could be more stories about women, especially and Latinos and immigrants and people who are left out. Like, a lot of there are more Asian American stories that need to be seen on stage. And so for me, I just try to open the door for other stories because I'm tired of the white man saving the world story. I go, no, no, no. They did not save the world. They screwed it up. It's going to take people of color and women to harmonize it and bring it back to wholeness. So yeah, I that's propaganda to me. I'm tired of those stories. I go, please, any other story besides the white man saving the world.
And I think the fact that you stayed true to that in Curves, like I know there was other points in time where people wanted you to have a happy ending where Anna was swept off her feet, and you really fought against that and stood true to what you believed.
That's right. Like there was a version where she was gonna drive off with the boyfriend and she was gonna, and it was gonna be a happy ending. And I'm like, and I told the producers, look, I was pretty open to whatever interpretation. I said, you just can't contradict the theme. And you can't have Anna's decision to go to college be based on her like being in love with a guy and going off to college to do that because that takes the power away from her. And it has to be that this is an important decision that she has to make irrelevant of the guy because the guy could be there or not be there and it doesn't matter. It's a life-changing decision that she has to consciously make as a result of self-love, not out of, trying to get a guy's approval or thinking she's in love. Because as we know, all this men come and go, but you have to live with yourself and love yourself and, be there for your own journey. So yeah, no, so I really fought against that. And luckily they had to listen.
Totally. And I think you also made like the most lovable, grounded love interest for her. Like it wasn't this machismo. Like it was someone that was so secure in their masculinity in a way that was gentle. And I think that's also a really cool, different version of
Yeah.
masculinity to celebrate. And so it pairs really well together. And I would also like to talk a lot about your own theater that you started in Boyle Heights, where you are elevating other stories beyond curves called CASA 0101 Theater. And so I know you're in your 25th year, and I want to hear about like what that theater has meant to you and kind of what it's done for that community in LA.
So, I started my own theater because no one would produce Real Women Have Curves in Los Angeles.
And they say if you don't have opportunity, you have to create it for yourself.
Yeah, I tell people I didn't mean to be this extraordinary. I I know, and I tell people
Sure.
I didn't mean to be this amazing. I just got fed up with being told no. And also being told like, who wants to see fat women on stage, like comments like that, or oh no, we don't present Latina women this way. This is so undignified that they're working class women in a sewing factory and stupid comments like that I got so furious that I said, I know it's going to be a hit. I might as well just keep all the money. That's fine. I was going to share this hit with you, but
Yeah.
you don't get it. So
You're a
then
boss.
I just produced it. Yeah. And I got so good at it that I was like, I could do this again. And I kept doing it and producing my own plays. And I said, I need my own theater. And again, it was all by gut instinct that I just started my own theater. And then I met the right person who was an administrator who knew how to run a theater.
Mm.
And we partnered up and championed. And I even married him and had kids with him. Anyway,
Well, there you
I'm
go.
but anyway, but he and I basically were brought together to give a voice to our community. And it's been amazing. We've produced over 200 plays celebrating Latinos, women, immigrants, people of all colors, shapes, and sizes.
Mhm.
And it's been wonderful. We produced the first Latino LGBTQ theater festival in the United States. And then we also produced like the very first trilingual play, American Sign Language, English and Spanish.
Mhm.
And we've done a lot of firsts. And I'm so proud of our theater. I just felt like, how could it be that we are the majority, Latinos are the majority in Los Angeles, and yet all these stories about Los Angeles never really represent us except as the bad guys. We have to be the good guy because we are the good guys, you
Right.
know? We are the good guys because despite, I love it how, all the horrific things that are being done to our community, and yet you have Mexicans crossing the border to save people during the flood, you
Mhm.
know? And that they're willing to risk their lives for people who they don't know, but they're like, you're a human being. I'm going to treat you as a human being, even though people don't see us as human beings. And so for me, I started to write plays and to tell our stories because I go, um, we are the heroes of our story. It takes a lot of dignity to constantly be made, to be called rapists, to be called aliens, and to be made to be the problem when we're not. We've been the solution. I mean, I tell people like how ridiculous that California is the world's like fourth largest economy, and that's due to our agriculture, and
Mhm.
that's due to all this undocumented labor, and yet they spit in our faces, calling us the bad guys. And so for me, I write stories to give our humanity back to our community, especially to me, because when I was growing up undocumented, you really internalize this idea that you're not human. And when you're a kid and you hear yourself being called an alien, you really go, well, maybe we are aliens. Maybe we're not human. And it's painful to think that you could even consider that. And so for me, my words is the way I give my humanity back to me. And I remind people that, people may say horrible things about you, and who cares? They don't know us. Just don't believe it. It's when you start to believe it that that's really where the harm comes. So I tell stories to celebrate the resiliency and the superpower and the courage that it takes to be ourselves. So yeah, we've been doing it for 25 years. I can't even believe it because, I started it with my student loans from UCLA. I was getting my master's degree and I had like a $4,000 student loan that I took out that I said, you know what, I could use this money to start my theater. And I did, and all these people came together for the same mission. And I tell people the secret to making something successful is to create an idea or to create something that your dream comes true, but 1,000 dreams come true within
Mm.
that dream. And that's how people come together to elevate this and make this happen. And right now, we do a lot of theater festivals, and we're doing a show called Fernando Mania, and it's celebrating Fernando Valenzuela, who was a hero to us, especially to me when I was 12. Like to have someone who was so extraordinary, who was a champion, who helped the Dodgers win the World Series, who basically shifted the narrative as far as the way Mexicans are seen in Los Angeles. It really inspired us. And so we wanted to thank him because he died last year. And we wanted to do the show to tell people about this amazing person, and also for his family to see it. And so that's going to be opening on August 29th, which is a very important day in Chicano culture, Mexican American culture, because it's a day that something tragic happened, but we use it as an opportunity to create stories to elevate the narrative about who we are as a people in our unity. And then I'm also presenting a play called Electrico. Electrico is a feminist Western drama.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm inventing a genre. Like,
Love.
and no, it is. It is totally like it's a story of, and can't tell you too much because there's a lot of like plot twists that are
You'll
like,
leave us with a cliffhanger. You'll leave us wanting more.
So it deals with a little town in Texas where the electricity has just come in, and they send an electrician to fix the electricity, and he discovers that the reason the electricity has gone out is because they lynched a Mexican man who was fighting for his land rights. And so he has to go get the body, but the white people, the sheriff, they want the body to stay up there to remind all Mexicans not to fight for the land rights. And so the widow gets to him first and begs him to please bring down the body of her husband. And so he's caught between this racial struggle, and he's from the north, so he doesn't have a. He basically decides to do the right thing, but in doing the right thing, he pisses off the sheriff and the people. And so then he becomes a hero to the Mexicans, but then he's caught in the middle of like whose loyalty. And then obviously, there's some surprises and twists, and but it really in the end is about a woman who started out wanting to kill herself because she just couldn't tolerate the fact that her husband's going to be eaten by vultures.
Mm.
And she's given the courage and strength by her sister-in-law, who tells her, no, 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 they're going to send an electrician. If you can get the electrician to bring down the body, it'll be okay. And so she believes, she has faith in this man. And then in the end, she discovers that no one's going to come to save this town. No one's going to come save her. She's going to have to do something extraordinary. And she basically becomes the hero of the story
Mm.
because she keeps waiting for the right man, the good man to do the right thing. And when there's no good man to do the right thing, she decides she has to do it.
It's so cool to see you building this canon of Latin stories that haven't been told yet. And even going back to like the Anne Frank parallel, like you telling me about this new show reminds me of Parade and kind of how the woman in
Yes.
Parade is she's the one that believes in the truth and believes in her husband. And even though they want to lynch him, like she's the one that's moving the needle forward and doesn't give up. And I think that type of valor and these types of layered stories that are, yes, they're tragic, but there's also like such a level of power in these women that come out of it. You're building a canon for people to like look back on and reference for eternity. And that's such a beautiful legacy.
No, and the reality is that, I submitted this play to so many playwriting contests and it got rejected everywhere. Even places that tell you, oh, we're willing to do the stories that no one's willing to tell,
Hmm.
or whatever their mission statement is bullshit, right? Because I was like, I don't know how much more serious, how much
Right.
more real and timely, and to be rejected, it just makes me go, oh, you know what? I must be doing something right if this story is getting rejected because it's offending a lot of people because it's the truth. And so for me, like same thing with Real Women. It got rejected everywhere in Los Angeles. And then to have it be on Broadway and having all these great reviews, and you go, no, I was right. I was right 30 years ago when I wrote this, or more than that, actually. But nobody was ready to hear this. So I realized that I have to write stories that are important now that no one's willing to tell.
Mm.
Because maybe after I pass, I'm hopefully not, but if I'm willing to accept that. I remember like I was watching the Susan B. Anthony documentary,
Hmm.
and I just broke down and cried when I realized that she died before women got the right to vote.
Hmm.
Because in my mind, I had assumed that she saw it within her lifetime. And when I realized, I just broke down and cried. But in that moment, I had this insight, this spiritual insight that said, you are not doing this for you. The freedom, the kind of world that you want, you are not going to get in your lifetime.
Hmm.
But you have to do this for your great, great, great granddaughter. You have to do this for the women that you will never get to meet so they get to have the life that you didn't get to have. So do not be attached to results. You just keep telling the truth. You just keep telling the stories. And when people are ready, and so sometimes you realize, yeah, do not get attached to the results. Do not just to do what you do. And maybe I am creating the kind of literature that is going to be done years later by all these theaters when it's obvious that this is the truth. But in the meantime, you're just offending people who don't want to produce you, who will never touch your work. Because, even I thought even after the success of Real Women Have Curves, the movie, and even after, hopefully, maybe after the success of this Broadway production, that people would be contacting me to commission me or asking me, what are you working on next? I have like 20 plays. No one's contacting me about anything. So I go, okay, I guess people aren't ready for me yet, but I'm ready for me. I'm ready to, and that's why I produce my own work. That's why every year I do a world premiere of a new play. And then I go, okay, I'm creating this literature and the canon. So when people are ready to do it, it's there.
But you look at after the 2016 election, all the women that went to Susan B. Anthony's grave, you look at like there is an honoring of what came before. And it is frustrating, I'm sure, to like be in the moment where it's not being seen. But you've also said that living joyously is your greatest rebellion, and that feels so signature to your story.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, what stamp you hope that you and Curves left on the Broadway community.
Well, I think this idea that everybody has a story to tell, I just thought it was so weird that my play was about loving yourself and celebrating your body and be living in joy, and
Mhm.
also the value and worth of human beings. And that the shows that got nominated for Tony, like that they were about corpses. Two shows were about corpses. One show was about two women who were so competitive and narcissistic and vain. They were trying to kill each other. And another one was about robots in love. And then my play was the antithesis of these four shows that were, got Tony nominations. And I thought, how much more freaking inspiring could a show be? How
Mhm.
much more, the fact that we dealt with race, class, gender, body, the fact that it was a comedy, even though it could have easily been a drama. I mean, like, how much more freaking extraordinary can you have a story
Right.
to really look at the human body and the human spirit and our self-worth? I was like, whoa. So for me, I hope it made people go, wow, like everybody matters. Everybody's story matters. Every human being, no matter how disempowered, powerless, and hopeless and othered you are, that you still matter. Like I was so touched by a woman who came to see my show 15 times. She was
Wow.
Filipino American. And I was surprised because, I did expect Latinos, but Filipino. And she says, oh my God, it's our story too. And I go, you're right, it is. It's very Catholic, very much, like Filipinos are Latinos, And I was like, and she said, I come here because this is cheaper than therapy.
Mm.
Because I see your show, I feel so good about myself and my life that I'd rather do this than therapy. So I'm hoping that it made people go, wow, we have to make more room for other stories besides these stories that are superficial, because a lot of them are very like safe stories that are very pleasant and entertaining for the whole family. Okay, I get it. But you also need stories that make you go, oh shoot, that really hold up a mirror. And I think that worked for us and worked against us, that we were really way too much of a mirror. But I think the people who are ready to see and really take a good look were really happy to go, oh my God, this is incredible to finally have a show that really mirrors society, but also speaks to me in such a personal, intimate, spiritual way. I'm hoping that it allows for more room, for stories that can be profound. I was inspired by Rent, and I was inspired by
Mm.
Miss Saigon, and then also Strange Loop. And I go, oh my God, you really can talk about deep, profound things. And so hopefully it makes more room for those kinds of stories that deal with so many other things, because for a lot of Latinos, like when you tell them it's a musical, they all think, oh no, is it like white people breaking out into song, like really fluffy shit, I'm sorry. And I'm like, that's the kind of people go, oh, I hated musicals until I saw yours. I say, yeah, because for me too, I was like, white people jumping out into song being fluffy. I don't have to pay money to see that,
Right.
like so for me, it was like, oh wow, Latinos can break out in song because they're not gonna cry, they're gonna be joyful and sing, that I want to see.
We talked about this in the last episode where Cola Scola, who wrote Oh Mary, said recently that they always thought that their big break was going to come from being the gay BFF on a sitcom, and the fact that what ascended them was something so true to them feels very similar to your story, and the fact
Mm.
that you stayed true to exactly the humanity that you wanted to share is so special. I also quickly want to talk about something that's also so signature to you, and that's the fact that you wear flowers in your hair, which is such like a beautiful cultural tradition.
I've been training as a shaman and a healer.
Mm.
And I've always loved roses because my father was extraordinarily great at just about everything, including gardening. And so I grew up with our house filled with roses. And in our culture, the rose represents the Virgen de Guadalupe, the sacred feminine. And in our culture, and especially when you're connected to the earth, like the flowers are an expression of your humanity, of your connection to earth and to Mother Earth, Tonantzin. So for me, that's like inherent, right? So we love roses. But as I started to do healing work, what I found out was that type of energy is an energy that spirals. And that energy is connected to the sacred feminine. And so what happens is that energy is such high vibrating energy that it blooms and it spirals just like a rose. And the rose is actually the representation of one of the highest frequencies that
Mm.
heals people and harmonizes and can get rid of dark energy. And when I made that connection and I actually witnessed it and have experienced it personally, and then I started smelling roses. I had one day where three times in three different locations, the roses. And I could not deny it that oftentimes when I'm going to do a healing and I call on the sacred feminine energy, which is curves, this energy is like the eight,
Mhm.
that is what I mean by real women have curves, is that all women have sacred feminine energy, which is this curving energy that harmonizes and uplifts and removes dark energy.
Mm,
And when I saw that this is something that works through me in my body, but that I also can call on, I could not believe it because I said, "Oh my God, all our lives we've been told that women are weak. In fact, it's the other way around. All women carry this energy, and when you put women together and you bring in this energy, you can overcome just about anything." And I think that's probably what happens because when people do this play and the women start taking off this clothes and they start celebrating, and then there's the audience starts going, "Oh wow," there's this kind of uplift that happens and people start smiling,
totally.
and it's almost as if like whatever shame people are carrying in that moment, that some of it gets like taken off. It's a sacred experience that I have witnessed so many times that I go, so for me, this rose represents my connection to the sacred feminine energy that I carry in my body and my spirit and that I can call on. But it's also beauty and grace. And I just feel so powerful. I feel like a goddess when I wear a rose, and oftentimes I wear four. And I do feel like I'm a superhero with these roses, right? And you think the most delicate thing, you can't imagine something this delicate and beautiful be that powerful, but that's who women are.
And I always say, like, in life, you're going to plant a million seeds and you never know what's going to grow. And I think your 30-year journey with getting curves to where it is so much about planting seeds and not knowing when it's going to grow or if it will even grow. And so I thank you so much for just being so honest and so vulnerable and bringing the humanity that all of us are craving so much right now. So I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to tell you my truth and share with you why I do what I do.